on most of the military actions, although I will be leaving declare war and all of the combats that can happen as a consequence of some of the military actions out, and those I will be explaining on a future video just so that this one doesn't take that long. So as you can see, first of all, I've used a different save file from another one of my games that is still ongoing, because I thought it would be much easier to explain the actions that will be featured today. But again, this is a bit more advanced game already towards the end of H2. This is the 8th round of our current 6-player game, and as I said, it would be much better for what I wanted to explain. So starting with the simplest of the military actions, we have the suppress and rest action, in which you can spend 1 military power per province, no matter if it is a town or a vassal, in which you want to suppress and rest. So for that, for instance, we would spend 1 military power, and we would check one of our provinces that has unrest. For example, here I have Erzurum, and we could just flip it to the side that has no unrest on it. So it's quite simple. However, there are several circumstances in which you are not able to suppress the unrest. So for example, here Poland, they are at war with Hungary. They are partitioning Hungary between Poland and Austria, and they have occupied, as you can see here depicted by the tokens, 2 of the last provinces that belonged to Hungary. So when you are occupying a province, you may not suppress the unrest on it, meaning that you will be suffering a bit from unrest if it comes in some events. So you have to watch out for that. And the other reason why you cannot suppress unrest is if there are any rebel units in the area where you are trying to suppress the unrest. So for example, here England would not be able to suppress unrest from Oxford. And this is problematic because at the end of the round, once the action phase is over and it comes into the rebels, peace and rebels phase, the rebels will be sieging provinces that have unrest and will apply these rebel tokens. That means that now the province is under control of the rebels. So that's all for the suppress and rest action. Quite simple. I just wanted also to provide this example here, that some cards, whether it is action cards or events, will also give a similar effect, like this one that says is an exceptional year, is an administrative card, and it says you may remove unrest from one of your towns or vassals. Sometimes this is confused with the actual suppress and rest action, and some people believe that this means that you have to apply the same restrictions as the action itself, which is not true. So just bear in mind, whenever you have such an effect that allows you to remove unrest from any of your provinces or towns, you can use it even if it is a province that you are currently occupying, or even if there are rebels in that area. So look for this type of effects whenever you are suffering, as I said, rebels in your areas, or you are occupying way too many provinces and a rebel dice icon is coming up in one of the events, because it will help you remove that unrest, which you would normally not be able to do through the suppress and rest action. So the second action that we're going to be having a look at is the recruit action. So with the recruit action, you are able to recruit units, no matter if they are land units or naval units, in any of your areas or areas of your vassals. Important to note is that you may recruit in multiple areas at the same time, so it's not like you're restricted, for instance, if you choose Wallachia and Bulgaria, to recruit all of your units there, but you can raise several units all across the map, and also you may recruit naval units together in the same action. And once again, the naval units, you can recruit them in one port, in several ports, in several sea zones, so you are not restricted to recruit only one type of unit, and you are not restricted to recruit the units all in the same location. To recruit units, you again have to spend 1 military power, and then the cost of the units depends on the types of units that you want to recruit. So here we have the different types of units. On the top we have the land units, infantry, cavalry and artillery, and then at the bottom we have the naval units, light ships, heavy ships, and galleys. The units for the land unit type, they are split between the three types of units that we can have in the game. Regular, meaning your own, the ones that are colored with your player colored. The mercenaries are the ones that are orange, and those you can recruit in addition to the regular ones. And the allied units, we will see it in the next round, but basically those are the units that you receive from your allies when you call them to arms for your wars that you either declare or are just declared. Depending on the type, depending on if they are regular, mercenary, or allies, they have a different cost. As you can see here, this artillery has an asterisk that says that it requires the cannons idea. Basically, there is an idea that is this one, that is the one that allows you to have actually artillery units in your armies. So you spend one military power in order to perform the action, and then you would have to calculate more or less how much money you're going to spend. So how to recruit units? To recruit units, depending on if they are land units or naval units, you are calculating what is called the military capacity for land units or naval capacity for sea units. So naval units. So we're going to be starting with the naval units. The naval units, you have 15 pieces that you can recruit as ships, regardless of the type, and that's your hard limit. With the land units, we have a limit of 20 manpower. With the ships, you are not limited on how many you can have at the beginning of the game. For instance, if you wish, you would be able to recruit all 15, while the manpower is determined by the rightmost open spots on your town and vassal trackers. So you would be checking what is your rightmost open slot, and that would tell you how much manpower you can have at that time. And this refreshes at the end of each round when you are coming into the income and upkeep phase, phase 4. This is when you are refreshing your manpower to recalculate how much you have. So currently, as I said, this is already a bit advanced. This is towards the end of H2. So I've already placed my first 20 small provinces, small towns, and now I'm with the second set of those. That's why I have this token, meaning that I have 10 available manpower, another 6, another 3, and another 2. So that would add up to 21, but there is only 20 available manpower. So the land units, the number of regular units that you can have will be determined by the size of your realm. So if you are smaller at the beginning of the game, for instance, France or England or Austria, they have only 8 available manpower, and that would be the limit of units that you can have at that point. And as your realm grows, you will have more available manpower. But with the naval units, you have 15 pieces from the beginning of the game, and you can use all 15. So when recruiting units, we will start, as I said, with the naval units. The naval units, you can recruit them either on a port, for example here Morea or Athena, that you can see that has this anchor symbol, that's a port. So you can recruit them either in the port itself, that counts as a space for naval units, or in the sea zones that are facing that those ports are facing to. So for instance here Morea, that sits in the border of those two sea zones, we could use that port to either recruit one ship in the Eastern Mediterranean or recruit one ship on the Aegean Sea. When you recruit a ship, if it is a light ship, you can either put it in your fleet, that you only have one of them in the space for the light ships, or you can place them in the map. So all of the ships that you see on the map right now, those are all light ships. With galleys and heavy ships, that those are the other two types of ships that you can recruit, those must be in your fleet. You cannot have them anywhere else. So that means that they will only be in one particular space in the map at the same time, at all times. So for example, my fleet is here at the Black Sea, and it contains those 4 galleys that I recruited before already. So if you would like to recruit, all you are doing, for instance, if you are recruiting the port, so let's say here in Jania, Morea, and Athena, so I would be able to recruit those 3 light ships, each one of them costing 4 ducats for a total of 12, and I would be able to place them in the port. If I want to place ships on a sea zone, that sea zone must not be hostile, meaning it cannot have any enemy ships, or it cannot have any NPR provinces that you are hostile to that have ports facing to that sea zone, unless there are any ships hostile to that NPR. We will see that a bit more detail in the upcoming video related to war, but basically if you are, let's say, here in the Adriatic Sea, if I were to be at war with the Papal States, since there are no ships hostile to the Papal State, this port on Ancona would be, let's say, patrolling. There would be a ship from the Papal See that is like patrolling this zone, that whenever any of my ships enters here, there would be a fight. And when I'm recruiting, since there is the NPR hostile province, it would be impossible for me to recruit units straight into the Adriatic Sea. So when recruiting into the sea zone, you're just counting up how many ports you have facing it. So for instance here, if I wanted to recruit in the Eastern Mediterranean, I would have 1 for Adana, 1 for Karaman, 3, 4, 5 and 6, meaning that I could be able to recruit 6 ships straight into the Eastern Mediterranean, for example. But let's say I just want to recruit those 3. When you're recruiting ships, if there is any empty trade protection slot, you may also occupy it at the same time, and then those 2 I will just leave them there. So I would just pay 12 ducats, so I would go to 15. Then, as we said, at the same time you may also recruit any land unit. So I have here some available manpower. In this case I have 9, meaning I can recruit 9 more units into my armies or straight in the map. Just like with the light ships, infantry can be placed either on the army mats, or you can be recruiting your infantry straight in the map. So I don't know if anybody, yeah, here for example we have England and France that have some of their meeples, and those represent infantry in the map. And similar to how the recruitment for naval units work, when you're recruiting land units, you select the areas in which you want to do that. So for example, let's say that I want to beef my army here. You would check that this is army 2 because it has the same silhouette as the unit that we are looking at. We would be having a look at the military capacity in that area. To calculate that, you check the towns that you have in the area. So here, for example, I have 1 town, and then you add up the towns in adjacent areas. So I have another 7, meaning that in Kurdistan, I will only be able to recruit 8 units. So even if my manpower is 9, I would only be able to recruit 8 because there are only 8 towns adjacent to it. And remember, for that purpose, a large town counts as 2. I do not own, well, yeah, here. For naval capacity, you are not counting your vassal port. So I would not be able to recruit ships, for example, in the Central Mediterranean or in these ports in Tunisia directly because they are my vassals, but I can recruit land units. So in Tunisia, if I wanted, I would be able to recruit 3 infantry, for example, because there are 3 provinces. Since I already have all of my armies in play, I would not be able to then recruit 1 new army in Tunisia, which means that I would not be able to recruit then cavalry and artillery, since those can only be recruited in the army. So let's say that I want to recruit units. We could do like I was showing. So let's say that I have these 6 units. They will go as infantry into army 2, meaning I'm left with 3 ducats. Then I want to recruit those 3 as infantry here in Tunisia. So that would cost 6. As I only have 3, in the game, whenever you need to pay for something, whether it is voluntarily or something forces you to do that, you may take a loan in order to get some extra cash. So I cannot see it now. Yeah, here. So let's say that I take a loan. When I take a loan, I take this interest token and I add 5 ducats into my treasury. Normally we would be using money, but for Tabletop Simulator it's much simpler to use the counters. So later on, with this interest token, I will be paying interest every round. I will have to reduce my income by 1, and in order to pay it back, I will have to spend 6 ducats instead of the 5 that I've received. So long term, it's a bit problematic, but sometimes you will need the cash and you will be doing this. And the reason for that, it was to recruit the 3 units that I did. So I'll remove that. And then, as you can see here, for instance, I have 3 units that are still in this exhausted manpower pool. the units that are in the exhausted manpower pool are not able to be recruited, and that will take us to one of the minor actions that you can take. As its name says, the minor action, meaning that doesn't take your entire turn, and you can take them in conjunction with the major actions, that it's called refresh manpower. For another military power, you may refresh up to 3 of your units that currently sit in the exhausted manpower to bring them back to the available one so that you can still recruit them. And let's say I want to recruit 1 more infantry into Army 1, which is sitting here in Crimea. So that would be how recruiting works. So according to the type of units that you want to recruit, it would give you a different cost. The reason why you would like to recruit ones or the others we'll go into detail in the next video, but this was just for us to understand how military capacity, naval capacity work. The difference, I didn't say that, but the difference between the two of them, as we said, you normally cannot recruit ships into sea zones that are hostile or that have NPRs with their provinces facing that sea zone, but in the land recruitment you could. So if, for instance, if I was having any enemies here, or let's say England wanted to recruit in East Anglia, they would be able to recruit units, and that would lead to an automatic combat. So the last one that I want to go through today is the activation. Activate units is the final action that we will be taking today, that allows you to either move units or siege them. With activate units, you must select if you're going to be doing a naval activation or a land activation, and those work a bit differently. With ships, which we can start with, so let's say that I want to move my fleet that is in the Black Sea and I want to bring it outside, you would select a spot in the map, a space in the map into which you want to move your ships. So for instance, let's say I want to move into the Aegean Sea. Normally movement in this game is that you move a unit up to 2 spaces, unless it comes into a hostile or neutral area or sea zone, in which moment they would have to stop. So let's say I select the Aegean Sea. So with the naval activation, what you do is that you select the space, so Aegean Sea in this case, and as many ships as you may move would move into that space. So in this case, because I have everybody within 1 space of the Aegean Sea, I would be able to move all of my ships from all of the different areas. So let's say I want to move the 2 that are not occupying trade protection slots from this space, and the fleet into the Aegean Sea. So pretty simple. If I wanted, for instance, to move into the Adriatic Sea, then both my units in the Eastern Mediterranean and the ones in the Aegean Sea would be able to get there, but the ones in the Black Sea would not be able to move. So that's how naval movement works. If you've played, for instance, Twilight Imperium 4, it's pretty similar. With the land activation, it's a bit different. Instead of selecting a spot and moving everything to that spot, you actually select an army or a unit in the map, and then you move that unit or you move that army, again, up to 2 spaces. So let's say that I want to move this army, I would be able to then move it to, let's say, Serbia, and then to Macedonia and Thrace. Along the way, if there were any units, so let's say that I had here a couple of units in Serbia and Albania, then I would be able to move, pick up those units and bring them with me to the Macedonia. Similarly, I would be able to drop units at the start of my movement or at the end of my movement, and then keep moving myself. So let's say that I would be able to leave from, this is Army 1, well, I don't have, but let's say I had 2 units. I would be able to drop one of them in the space I am in, and then move, pick up the other ones, and move to the final destination. With the naval movement, it's pretty straightforward because the sea zones do not belong to anyone. But let's say that I am here in Crimea and I want to move my units into Wallachia and Bulgaria. As you can see in this situation, Moldavia is owned totally by a player. In order for me to cross, I would require to have military access. In this case, because it's a player, that player will have to give me permission to move my units through it. And then, because it's not a friendly area, I would have to actually stop there once I move in. And this would be pretty basic, like I would just have to speak with Poland, come to an agreement with them. Perhaps they would require me to, I don't know, later give them back the favor or make a payment afterwards. And if they allow me, then I would be able to move. If they don't allow me, I would have to find another alternative. Let's say that I want to go through the other place, through Circassia, because I want to move to Rum. In this case, at least one of the provinces in that area belong to an NPR. When I want to move through, I have two options. If I had any influence in it, I would be able to remove the influence for me to move, and again, I would have to stop because it's a neutral or hostile area. Or if I don't, I would have to spend 3 ducats in order for me to get military access. Note that you may not get military access if you were to have a claim in the area. So let's say that this claim was here instead of in Syria. I would not be able to ask for military access since I have claimed it. So they would be a bit wary, let's say. The NPRs wouldn't trust my intentions since I have a claim on them. Then if there would be, let's say that Poland in their war with Hungary, they still wouldn't have occupied their provinces, and similarly they would have moved into that area. So here there would be a combat, it's a hostile place, so the movement would be finished once that happens. In addition to moving just in addition to doing these simple activations where we just move around, there are a couple of things additionally that can be done. So let's say that following the example, Poland moved into Hungarian plain, they had to fight Hungary and they won the fight. In a later turn, they would be able to take an activate action in order to siege. So we would just check the army. This is army 2, and in army 2 they have 3 infantry and 3 cavalry. The way sieges work in this game is that when you're trying to siege, you are activating individual units that are in that area to siege down the provinces in the area. Each infantry unit can siege up to 1 tax worth of provinces. Each cavalry unit can siege half tax of a province, meaning that normally you would need 2 of them to even siege 1 small province. And artillery allows you to siege 2 tax provinces. That can be either 2 small provinces or 1 large, it doesn't matter. So in this case, Hungary had 2 provinces, Pest and Sables, so they would need to activate 2 infantry in order to siege both. When you are paying the first military power to take the activate action, that allows you already to activate one of the units. So let's say they would have taken 1 military power to activate the army 2. That would pay for the first infantry, and then they would have to pay 1 more for the second, allowing them to then occupy the town. So we'll put it back as it was. And whenever you siege, you place one of your town tokens on it, but always on the unrest side. And remember, this matters later for the suppress action that we were checking before, because they would not be able to suppress those as those are occupied. If it would be a province belonging to another player, so let's say that England and France are at war, England manages to land one of their armies into Brittany and Normandy, and then they take the siege action, they would just place not the occupy token, but they would just simply put their tokens on top of the French ones, again with the unrest on their side. And this way you can clearly see who was the owner. In this case, France is the rightful owner and England is just the occupant. The other thing that can be done when you are taking an activate action is that you can combine those land activations and naval activations with what is called a naval movement. So in this game, land units can only move through land areas, and the sea units can move only through the sea areas, the sea spaces, or into the ports. But you can use your boats as a imaginary bridge to connect areas between them. So for instance, with this land unit, I would be able to take a land activation and use that to then do a naval transport to move my land unit somewhere else. So the way it works is that you would have to basically declare where you're going. So let's say I want to go from Crimea to Wallachia, Bulgaria. So you would need units that are connecting those two areas by sea, connecting those sea zones where the ships are. So for example, here Crimea is touching the Black Sea zone, and Bulgaria and Wallachia it's also touching that same sea zone here. They are bordering the same place, meaning that these three ships would allow me to do a naval bridge to transport my units across. For each ship in the naval bridge, you can bring 3 units. So in Crimea right now, I have 5 units, meaning that I would require at least 2 ships in order to bring them. If I only had 1, let's say this is the case, I would only be able to bring 3 units. So I would have to drop 2 behind to then be able to move the other 3 across. You can combine the naval activation or the land activation, as I said, with the naval transport. So for instance, if I'm taking a land activation, let's say I want to move, let's imagine I don't have these ships here in the Aegean Sea, but let's say I want to bring this army from Macedonian Thrace all the way to Crimea. I would be able to then do the first of the 2 movements into Wallachia and Bulgaria, and then use the naval transport to move across through Crimea. Again, we would have to check that I have enough ships to transport everything, but in this case that's possible. But the other way around, let's say I want to move this unit across the sea. Once again, imagine that those ships are not there. I would not be able to first move with the naval transport here to Wallachia and Bulgaria and then move again, because movement ends once you land. So you can move 1 space before using the naval bridge, but you cannot use any remaining movement once you've landed. With the naval transport, after a naval movement is pretty similar once you move that unit. So let's say that again I was moving the ships just like I did. I moved them here into the Aegean Sea. At the same time, I would be able to use the naval transport to then move one of my armies across a naval ship that contains the units I just moved. So if I was to move here the units, I would be able to then do a naval transport, let's say from here all the way to Crimea, or moving through it, let's say to board, let's say I'm at war with Egypt, so I would be able to then go across Cyrenaica, following the same rules. You need to have a number of ships sufficient to transport all of your units, keeping into account that each ship can transport 3 of them. And when you are doing that after a naval movement, the important thing to note is that your land units must be already adjacent to the sea zone. So it's not like I can, let's say, move the units here and then say I will move 1 space and 2. That's not possible. They would have to be already adjacent to a sea zone of the bridge. And the bridge doesn't need to, like the units that you are moving, for instance, this naval activation, it doesn't matter that you move them in one sea zone, like here in the Aegean Sea. Doesn't require you to have the land units that you want to move with that naval transport adjacent to them. You could do this, for example, to transport the ones from Crimea. It's just that the units that you move must move into a sea zone that will be part of the bridge itself. So yeah, so those are the actions I wanted to check for today. So the military actions that we saw were suppress and rest, and important to note that you are not able to suppress those that are occupied or with rebels, but there are some effects in cards that will allow you to remove and rest, and those don't count as suppress and rest. We were checking the recruitment, the refreshment power, and we were checking also the activations. So this is not all of the military actions. I will be covering, as I said, declare war and combat and so on in another video. So sometimes because of a movement that we were seeing, there will be also a combat, but I thought that this video would be too long if I also explained that there. So hope you enjoy, hope you liked the video, and I hope to bring some more when I have more time. Take care, have a nice day. Alright, I just realized when I finished the video that I didn't cover actually movement in the distant continents, which is also a bit important for these actions. So in the distant continents, you are moving just similarly to how you do in the main map, meaning that you're moving from area to area, the ones that are adjacent to each other. However, it's quite important here to note that in the distant continents, you are only moving one space. So, for example, if I want to move this army from Mississippi and I would like to move it to Virginia, it would take me 2 actions. First to move it to Florida and then to move it to Virginia. Because upon entering in any area or sea zone in the distant continents, you have to stop your movement. Same goes for the ships. If I wanted to move this ship, let's say, from the Caribbean Sea, this French one, to the southeastern Pacific, it would take me 2 activations. First one to move it to the southwestern Atlantic, and I could occupy that trade protection slot, and the second one would be a future action where I move it to the southeastern Pacific Ocean. In the distant continents, this we covered already, I believe, in the exploration actions, but the distant continents are connected between them and with the main map within these letters that connect them with each other. And the rest of the actions work the same, but this is just something that happens for the distant continents that it was quite important to say, and I failed to mention. So yeah, now we are finished, so take care and see you in the next video.